Good morning guys, and welcome to this edition of Hikelopedia. Now, in keeping with my recent episode about Islamic heritage in Singapore, today I've decided to do an episode about Singapore's Indian heritage. So I'm going to visit a few places and talk about how they are connected to Indian immigration to Singapore and the Indian community in general. So you may be thinking, well, why the hell is he standing at the Raffles statue? Well, that's a good question. That's because, did you know, the first ever Indians to officially set foot in Singapore were the 120 Sepoys, or soldiers, of the Bengal native infantry that accompanied Stamford Raffles when he landed on this very spot in 1819. Now, they were also accompanied by a handful of other Indian nationals that are not so well known, because they were the chaiwalas, the washermen, and the servants that took care of Raffles and his soldiers. After landing, they set up camp near the foot of Fort Canning Hill just over there, which at that time was known as Bukit Larangan. And these Sepoys, as well as being soldiers, after a while they were eventually allowed to partake in other activities such as farming and money lending, because, you know, you've got to make a living somehow, and I'm sure the wages from the British Army weren't too great at that time. Following Singapore's establishment as a free port, the Sepoys were soon followed by an influx of other Indians, many of them Muslims from Tamil Nadu. Known as Chulias, they set up as shopkeepers and traders. By 1824, out of a total population of 10,683 people, there were 756 Indians in Singapore. Now again, you're probably thinking, why is he standing outside a cathedral when this is about Indian heritage? Shouldn't he be outside the Sri Mariamman temple or something? Well, you're probably right, but I'm standing here because, believe it or not, this place was actually built by Indians, or Indian convict labourers to be more precise. Now that's because starting in 1825, just 6 years after landing here, and just a year after assuming full control over Singapore, it became a penal colony of sorts, because the British started sending Indian convicts to Singapore. Yes, another glorious example of Britain's colonial past. Now, these convicts weren't necessarily bad people. Some of them were, of course, but others were people the British simply wanted rid of, such as those who were advocating Indian independence. So they were shipped off overseas to places such as Singapore, where they couldn't cause any further trouble. The first group of 79 men and 1 woman arrived from Madras on the 18th of April 1825. A week later, 122 more convicts arrived from Bengal. Now, these arrivals were housed in a go-down near the mouth of the Singapore River, from where they were put to work as labourers, building much of Singapore's early infrastructure, including, as I said earlier, this beautiful cathedral in 1856, North and South Bridge Roads, Serangoon Road, Commercial Square, Collier Quay, Kampong Glam, the road to the summit of Bukit Timah, Raffles Lighthouse, Fort Fullerton, and the Istana. All these and more were built by Indian convict labour. The convicts also blew up the original Long Yarman during widening work on Keppel Harbour in 1848, under the instruction of the British, of course. After so many major infrastructure projects, the last major project worked on by convict labour was the Kavanagh Bridge. Oh, and a quick footnote, just in case you were wondering, convicts did indeed build the Sri Mariamman temple too. So today's Singaporeans have a lot to thank them for. Now, there are several really interesting military stories concerning Indians in Singapore over the years, but the one I'd like to talk about today is that of the Indian National Army. Now, it was here at Farrer Park, just 2 days after the fall of Singapore on February the 17th, 1942, that 45,000 Indian POWs were handed over to the Japanese by the British. Now, instead of locking them up like the Australian and British POWs, the Japanese instead promised them freedom. You see, Japan had for a while been agitating amongst the ranks of the Indian soldiers in the British Army in an attempt to get them to switch loyalties. And promises of help to liberate India from the British eventually convinced thousands of these soldiers to switch allegiances to the fledgling INA, under the leadership of former British military officer and Indian independence movement member Mohan Singh. Singh, however, soon became disillusioned with what he perceived as a lack of support from the Japanese leadership, and he was subsequently removed from his position in December 1942 and replaced by Indian nationalist Subhash Chandra Bose. Bose arrived in Singapore around 6 months later, where he famously proclaimed the formation of the Government of Free India in a speech made here at the Cathay Building. The INA went on to fight alongside the Japanese in several battles during their ultimately unsuccessful Burma campaign. Then, following the surrender of Japan in August 1945, Bose announced in a 15th of August radio broadcast the end of the INA's operations. Nowadays, all that remains to remind us of the INA in Singapore is this memorial plaque at the Esplanade, which was erected in 1995 to replace the original monument that was put up during the Japanese occupation and the British destroyed when they came back to Singapore after the war. Bose, meanwhile, died just 3 days later when the Japanese bomber that he was travelling in crashed upon takeoff from Taipei, Taiwan. And despite news of Bose's death, mystery remained over his fate for several years afterwards, as rumours circulated among his supporters that he was still alive. Now, talking of mysteries, another famous Indian in Singapore was Parsi businessman Navraji Mystery. Trained as an engineer, he arrived in Singapore from Bombay at the age of 24 in 1909. He worked at Keppel Harbour for a while before finding employment at the aerated water factory of another Parsi businessman, F.M. Framroz. Now, he became rich after quitting to start his own company, Phoenix Aerated Water Company, in 1925, in a move that created a rift between the two men that lasted right up until just before Mystery's death in 1953. In later life, he donated $950,000 to the General Hospital to fund the Mystery Wing for the treatment of underprivileged children. And in his will, he bequeathed $1 million to charities in Bombay and Malaya. Like so many other of Singapore's successful businessmen and philanthropists, he also had a road named after him in 1955. Okay, I think it's time to go and get some lunch. Now, I'm probably the only person eating here without my hands. Not because I don't want to, just because I'm not very good at it. So I'm going to use the cutlery, I'm afraid. I got the vegetarian set meal for just $5, and then I fancied a beer, so I got this one. Never heard of it before, but just beer, $4.50. Cheers. Whoa. Strong.
some lime chutney, although I'm not a big fan of it. I'll try it again. Still not a fan. I think the last time I had food off a banana leaf was also in Singapore, but it was probably about 25 years ago, the first ever time I came here. Now, I don't know about you, but one question I've always wondered about is why is the Tamil community so dominant in Singapore? I did a little bit of research and the answer is relatively simple. Most of the Indians who came to Singapore in the 19th century came to escape famine, disease, poverty and overpopulation. And most of them came as indentured labourers. And they came from Tamil Nadu because for many, many years that was the only region of India that the government allowed people to emigrate from. Therefore, most migrants came from regions close to the two authorised ports, Madras and Nagapatnam. The labourers were subsequently followed by educators, doctors and administrators from South India and Sri Lanka as demand for their services increased. Other Indian communities who arrived include the Sikhs, who started to come to Singapore in the 1870s. A group of 200 Sikh policemen arrived in 1879, and they were soon followed by others who found work as security guards and caretakers, night watchmen and things like that. And later they began to branch out into other sectors such as money lending. The 19th century also saw commercial migrants from northern India begin to arrive too, such as Bengalis, Gujaratis, Marwaris and Parsis. I enjoyed that. It was good.
Now this video wouldn't be complete without a little segment about Little India. So here I am. I'm sorry that I'm standing in the shade, except it's pretty hot over there and I'm sweating enough already. Originally a residential area for Europeans, Serangoon Road's proximity to the river attracted people, mainly Indians, connected to the cattle industry. The animals at the time were used for transportation, their milk, and obviously their meat. And you can see this in some of the street names in this area. Soon, other Indian immigrants arrived in the area to escape overcrowding in the city and to provide goods and services to the area's growing population. Places of worship and community facilities followed, and with that, Little India was born. Okay guys, that's it for today. I've only been able to provide a brief snapshot of Indian heritage in Singapore, but obviously if you're interested in finding out more, then you can always visit this place, the Indian Heritage Centre. I was here a couple of weeks ago and had a really good time. It's pretty interesting and a lot of the activities are free. So if you're interested in finding out more about Indian heritage in Singapore, then you should come to this place. A little bit of news before I go. Now, over the last few weeks, a few of my subscribers and commenters have asked me whether I have any Hikelopedia t-shirts or merch for sale, and the simple answer is no, I don't. Honestly, I don't feel I'm popular enough that I would sell the merch if I got it done. So I've come up with a compromise. I've managed to get 50 of these Hikelopedia patches done, and I'm going to make them available to people who buy me a coffee. But there's a catch. You've got to buy me either 3 or 5 coffees to be eligible for a patch. All you need to do is buy me a coffee and leave your address in the message, and then I'll whiz one of these over to you. And I'm also going to make this available to people who've already bought me a coffee. If you would like a patch, then please just get in contact with me somehow, send me your address, and I'll get a patch to you as soon as I can. So you too can look like a balding middle-aged vlogger. How cool is that? Anyway guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my Indian Heritage Trail. If you did, then don't forget to smash that like button, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. And if you'd like to catch my adventures every Saturday morning, don't forget you can always ring that bell for notifications. That's it for now guys. I'm going home. Take it easy and I'll see you next time. Over and out.